Daf Zayin Omid Aleph, but there was a question that came through from Hendon. A question from Hendon, from Benji and family. Do you remember we mentioned last week that you were talking about Iber Shana, intercalating the year? Do you remember we have an Iber Shana, which means every so often we've got 3, 6, 8, 11, 14, 17, 19, 7 years out of 19 are leap years. But in the olden days, even that's the calculations would work that way. But if you do remember, prior to the calendar, it was up to the Bezdin to decide whether there would be that extra Adar Sheni or not. And of course, they would take their views together with the help of professionals, looking at the soil, looking at growth, weather. And one of the things we mentioned last week is the actual deadline is the last day of Adar. They can actually still make an Adar Sheni. The question raised was, we know that we have 2 days Yom Tov based on the fact that it was impossible to get the messengers out that far, let's say when it came to Sukkot, or Rosh Hashanah, or Pesach, until the messengers went out to tell everybody that this, when exactly, which day of the month did they make because as we know, there are 29 and a half days in a month going a lunar month. So they weren't sure exactly when the Eidim would have come, and therefore they're in doubt. If you're far away from Eretz Yisrael, you would be in doubt as to know exactly what day would be the first of Nisan, and indeed what day would be Pesach. So for that reason, we have 2 days Yom Tov outside Eretz Yisrael, because they did not know the date based on the first of the month. It wasn't enough time to be able to tell everybody exactly what day did they actually make Rosh Chodesh. So the question posed was this: if indeed you can make an Iber Shana right up to the wire, as you'd say, right up to the last day of Adar, imagine that that's what they did. And then they sent a note out to everybody saying, we have made an Adar Sheni. Now, if that would go right up to the end, the last day of Adar, there will be a limit how far you could get to tell people. Clearly, you'd have 2 weeks to, and this time, people were imagining it was Pesach. They were stocking up with their matzahs and all the other good things for Pesach. Suddenly, there's an announcement. I'm afraid it's not actually Pesach. It's going to be a second Purim. Actually, it's going to be Purim. It will not be Pesach. So the question raised was, these people will expect it to be Pesach. They will not know in time that in fact it's not Pesach, it's actually the month before, it's Adar Sheni. I think that was your question, Benji, in which case people will not know when Pesach is. They will find out eventually, but they will be keeping Pesach a month early. If you're in Eretz Yisrael, the message, the notes, the messages will come out and people will know. But if you're in a distant place from Eretz Yisrael, you will not know, and therefore would assume a normal 12-month year, and therefore it will be now Pesach. These people will keep Pesach. Very good question. And the answer to that, I have not found that written anywhere, but the answer you have to say is the following. Just like we in Chutz La'aretz have 2 days Yom Tov, in that circumstance, they would keep Pesach twice. It would not be a brocha levatala because they would be keeping it under, assuming that it might be Yom Tov and thinking it is Yom Tov. It's true. Of course, when it comes to 2 days Yom Tov, it's one extra day. But if you think about it, if we're having a second day of Yom Tov as we do in Chutz La'aretz, all those brachas that we make al achilas matzah, if it really is not the first night of Pesach, you might think it's a bracha levatala. The Chazal, Chachomim have said, don't worry about that. We'll keep 2 days Yom Tov, and it's not a bracha levatala. You'd have to say the same thing here, that although they're keeping the Pesach, that whole, a month early, as it were, don't worry about it, because Chazal would say you're keeping it because of the doubt, and therefore will be no problem. Having said that, we did say in the Gemara that, as I say, is the last opportunity. It would be extremely rare that the Chachomim would not have made their decision much earlier than that. We did say don't tell people in Tishri, because that's a little bit too early, but you'd expect them to say as soon as possible. And therefore, all we're learning here is probably a theoretical situation where they, in fact, can make an Adar Sheni right up to the last day of Adar. Whether in practice they would do that, perhaps because of the reason you're mentioning as well, it would be very confusing for people. So it would be very unlikely they'd want to do that. But if they suddenly found themselves with the weather, which was really cold, advice being taken that you really do have to have a leap year, then they would have a leap year. The people far away from Eretz Yisrael who would be keeping Pesach, which would turn out to be a month early, that would not be a problem because they're doing that, assuming it is Yom Tov, and the Chachamim would know that. Okay, so that's in answer to your question. Malcolm, I think, has got a question for us.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you said. So the assumption that you said, it all makes sense. Is it then, is it completely impossible to have the opposite assumption? In other words, that you go assuming that it will be a leap year, but then only at the last minute,
you're a good
last
one.
minute you find out that it wasn't. Then you're stuck with
a good question. You are right that some years you'd expect, for example, if you had 2 years which weren't a leap year, you'd expect there to be one leap year. But the general rule would be people would expect a 12-month year. Now, it's true, as I just mentioned, if there are 2 years without a leap year, and then the third, you'd expect that to be a leap year. So there will be people getting very anxious. And you can be sure in that situation, the fact that everybody is considering that maybe it's going to be a leap year, you would have thought the rabbis will announce that very early. If people, as you're saying, are already suspecting that it may be a leap year, then it looks as if it probably will be a leap year, in which the rabbis, if they want it to be a leap year, will announce it as soon as they can. So that immediately, it sounds like immediately after Sukkot, they probably announce that in fact there will or there won't be a leap year. Do you understand? If you're, there will be an announcement going out, and if they, and presumably, practically speaking, they will try and get that announcement out as soon as possible. And therefore, they would always assume we haven't heard anything from the rabbis, and therefore, I know we expected it to be a leap year. We haven't heard anything from them. They would have told us by now. We will assume there is not a leap year. If it turns out they're wrong, it doesn't matter, but you're quite right. The rabbis will try and get that announcement out as soon as they can to avoid this complication. But what we were looking at is the possibility, I would say, theoretical terms, what is that last date? And that last date actually is the last day of Adar. I don't know if we got Mervyn with us. Yes, we got Mervyn. Hello, Mervyn. Good to see you. And a few others there. Anthony, good. Nice to see everybody. Sam. Hello there. Mervyn had a question, which was the following. Do you remember we were looking at the months and we were saying what actually is the first month of the year? I know we always talk about Nisan, etc. How do you know? You look at the Torah, you say the first month of the year, Pesach is in the first month of the year. What is that first month of the year? In our type of terms, maybe Adar is the first month of the year. You see what I mean? Maybe a little bit early. Yeah, that was a question we had. We searched high and low in the Torah and there was no help. And therefore, what we found in the end is we had to go to Zechariah. We went to Megillah, where we found the actual words Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. Yeah, that was where we found that it was, remember, it called Nisan was the first month. The 12th month of the year was Adar. And that tells us exactly that the first month actually is Nisan. The question Mervyn raised was, he's found another posuk, as he would do, doing his Chazor of Nach. Yes.
I've just said, just been more discussed. It was Yehuda as well, Yehuda Khan, who was also the Mario Mokka.
Okay. Well, a good, very good joint question from you. And his question is the following. In Malachim, we find that it talks about, I'll give you one example. It talks about Chodesh Ziv. And it says that is the second month. Well, Chodesh Ziv is Iyar. Your question, Mervyn, and Yehuda is Tosfos' question. Not Tosfos' question, but Tosfos mentions this point, Agav. And what I mean is this. Tosfos quotes the Yerushalmi and that explains that prior to Bovel, they used Hebrew names, and the months they would have used would be Ziv for Iyar. They would have used bull, it turns out, for Cheshvan. And the Gemara explains why. Because Ziv is normally, let's talk about Ziv in particular, the brightness. That is the Chodesh Aviyah, when you've got all the flowers out, you've got the colourful blossoms. The answer, though, we still don't know. Although Tanakh calls Chodesh Ziv the second month, I don't know which month it's referring to. Where we are, we know Nisan, that's the March, etc. We know Nisan and Iyar. If I were to tell you it's the second month of the year and it was Chodesh Bul, I know now in retrospect that Chodesh Bul is Iyar. But just by mentioning the word Chodesh Bul and looking at Tanakh, you wouldn't know that's referring necessarily to Iyar. You might think it's referring to, in our terms, Nisan. I know he calls it the second month of the year, but maybe the year begins with Adar. Why is it called brilliant? Because in fact, that's when you start getting the beautiful blossoms already in Nisan. As we know, there's a special bracha to make when you see the blossoms in Nisan. They are beginning, we've had a similar idea before, the beginning of the blossoms is in Nisan, what we call Nisan. Do you understand, Mervyn? And therefore, it's possible that although now in retrospect, when we say the second, Bul is the second month of the year, sorry, Ziv is the second month of the year, or Macheshvan would be the 8th month of the year, we don't know where the starting point is. Now, you'll tell me it says Ziv, which sounds like there's blossom on the tree, but in Nisan there's some blossom. Does it mean the beginning of the blossom, or when most of the trees and the plants, etc., in blossom? So the answer, and you can see the fact that the Yerushalmi brings that and doesn't have a problem with it, just says, we know the months of the year from the time they came back from Bovel, and they use Nisan. Now, we know today Nisan is the first month of the year. So if you just had the word Ziv, although it's called the second month, you wouldn't know where the starting point is unless you use the words they brought back with them from Bovel, and they haven't stopped. There's been no break in Nisan being from that day onwards. We've always called the first month of the year Nisan, and therefore we know it's that month, the month, like as we say now, March, April, that is the month of Nisan. It's the first month of the year. So yes, it is meant, there are Bul, for example, the 8th month, there is Ziv referred to as the second month, but we wouldn't know, although it's called the second, depends where you start. If you start with Adar, then that will be Nisan, and it can still be called Ziv. So therefore, I'd say have a look at that Tosfos. He mentions it agav, those two examples, and therefore we are forced to go to Zechariah or indeed Megillas Esther, where we find the words Nisan, we find the words Kislev, we find Adar mentioned, and therefore we do know that the first month of the year actually is Nisan, what we know and love as Chodesh Nisan. So let's go back now to our Gemara where we're up to, which is, we mentioned last week, do you remember that you start the Chatzi Shekel, which people give every year. Every person gives a half a shekel, rich, poor, all giving half a shekel, and that half shekel was used for the communal korbanos. What's a communal korban? For example, a tomid in the morning and the afternoon. A musaf offering is communal. The money would come from the half shekel, which was given. It was given, and we explained last week, remember we had that wonderful posuk, Olas Chodesh b'chodshei lechodshei hashana. I think we learned that last week. I think we did. That the Chodesh, it's a month. There's 1 month of the year where you renew. And remember, we learned from there across to Pesach that it's the Chodesh of Nisan where you give a half a shekel. And from Chodesh Nisan onwards, you start utilizing that money that was given just prior to Nisan. What do you do with the old money? The old money that's used is used for other things, the upkeep of the Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, whatever was needed. That money would be used for that purpose, but you'd start with fresh coins given just before Nisan. And we pick that up here where the Gemara says, 4 lines up from the end of the Omud, which is Daf Zayin Omud Aleph. Have you got Daf Zayin Omud Aleph? Either Gemara or on the attachment. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda mentioned in the name of Shmuel, Premier Division Amir, Shmuel, Korbanos Tzibor Haboim Be'echov Menissen. Important point here. The Korbanos Tzibor, these are communal offerings that start, as we said before, on the 1st of Nisan. Mitzvah lahavi min achodosh. It's a mitzvah, but it's not, I say, impossible to use old coins. V'imhevi min ayoshon, if the people involved, the treasurer, I suppose, of the Beis Hamikdash, use the old money, it doesn't mean that that's wrong and the korban is not considered a communal offering. It is, it's fine. He shouldn't have done. Continue the Gemara. You got it 3 lines up. Elo shechiser mitzvah. A mitzvah has been missing. You've missed that opportunity. In other words, you often find this with korbanos. Normally, when, if the Torah will tell you you've got to do something or not to do something, that's it. When it comes to korbanos, in many instances, when the Torah says you should do this, it means that's the preferred. And then the psukim for that, when we get around to Zvochim and Menachos, there's the psukim generally with korbanos tell me it's not ma'akev, which means it doesn't prevent, it's the preferred route, it's a mitzvah, but it doesn't matter if you don't do whatever you're told to do. Here's another very good example where it doesn't mention it twice. It says, Oras Chodesh B'chodsho, the Torah would prefer the korbanos from the 1st of Nisan to come from the new coins which are given. Remember, Kisiso is Rosh, a person giving the half shekel every year. The Torah would prefer that the new coins would be used for the new year, beginning Nisan and finishing in Nisan, but it's not, it doesn't prevent the korban from being a kosher korban. Elo shechisa mitzvah. It's that is the view of Rav Yehuda Omer Shmuel. Have you got it 3 lines up? And then the Gemara very nicely brings what we call a Tov Nun Hey. Anybody into Tov Nun Hey? So Mervyn would tell us a Tov Nun Hey. Got Mervyn here for Tov.
Yeah, tough. Tanya Namihochi.
Well done. Give the man a point there. And if you would have been nearer, you'd have a pat on the back. So you can have a virtual pat on the back. Tanya Namihochi, which is always nice. What a Tanya Namihochi means, we do find a brisa. Now, don't forget the Mishnayos. Everybody knew all the Mishnayos. The brisas was outside, would have been omitted by Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi from the Mishnayos. Otherwise, it will be much longer than it is already. All those thousands of Mishnayos would be longer. So Rabbi Yehuda decided what to incorporate and what not to incorporate, but it's still a brisa. Brisa means it's external to, that's bar, outside. It's external to the Mishnayos, but nevertheless authentic, and therefore not everybody knew all the brisas because they weren't known by everyone. And so therefore, the statement that Rabbi Yehuda mentioned in the name of Shmuel, the Gemara is very excited to tell us, in fact, there's a brisa supporting that view. So that's good news. Tanya Namihochi is a brisa or a tosefta, which also means a tosefes, in addition to our Mishnayos. And what have we got there? 3 lines from the end. Korbanos tzibor, or korbanos tzibor, the korbanos are communal offerings, haboim be'echad b'nissen, that come from the very 1st of Nisan, mitzvah lahavi min achodosh. It's a mitzvah to bring them from the chodosh, means from the new money which had been given. Everybody's given during Adar. That's, of course, as a memory of that, we have now Pasha Shkolim, to remind us that's what they did. And the people would give the half shekel in Adar, so that from the 1st of Nisan they can start using those new coins. However, says this brisa, which is very good because it does support what Shmuel had said, B'imhevi min hayoshon yotzah, elo shechisa mitzvah. But nevertheless, a mitzvah has been missed. You've missed that opportunity as a positive mitzvah, but nevertheless, it is still good. The korbanos are good. And as we see before, many instances where the Torah tells you to do something, it means that's the preferred route, particularly with korbanos. Normally not. When the Torah said, you've got to keep Shabbos, it's not like a preferred option. And so therefore it's not a preferred option, but with korbanos in many instances is. However, the brisa continues. And this fast, David's got a question.
So I was just going to ask, when it talks about new funds, does it actually mean funds that have been given in the new year? Because that would be actually on the first, they would have to be given on the first day of Nisan.
No. Good, no. You're right. It's good point. What it means is they've been collected afresh, and you would have done that in Adar. So it's a yearly collection, and you'd start with those coins. It's not collected from Nisan. It's collected from prior to Nisan, so that from the 1st of Nisan, you can now use the coins which were collected just previous to Nisan. Yeah?
So there'd be you say it'd be an annual collection?
Yes, absolutely.
So it's either, if it's now Nisan, it was either collected in the previous month, which is fine, or 13 months ago, in which case...
No, that would have been used the previous year. So that money and the coins they would have collected would then be used, delegated, I suppose relegated is really the word. It would be relegated to other uses rather than actually korbanos.
But it says imhevi min hayoshon.
If they did, it's still a good korban. Don't think, there's some instances if you do something wrong to a korban, it will be considered now the korban would be possible, and you'd have to bring it again. See, let's say this happened by mistake. Let's happen by mistake on the 1st of Nisan. It's confusing. They got different areas where they collected, where they got the coins, and they got mixed up. And then suddenly, at 11 o'clock in the morning, somebody says, you took the coins from last year. So the question is now, was that a good korban or not? Do we need to bring the Talmud again? So the answer is no, don't worry. You've missed the opportunity. Can't bring a Talmud twice. Don't do it again. Slap wrists for somebody. But the korban's a good korban. That's really what we're saying. So in Mechisa, it's fine, but it's really, you've missed that opportunity. But the Brisa does add something else. Not that we needed to know this, because that was not stated by Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, but this is a fascinating halacha. The yochid shehisnadev misheloi, someone who gives misheloi from their own money, kasherin, it's kosher. Ubivad sheyimsureim letzibor, as long as the person has actually given it over to the community, and he's saying this is not my money anymore, it is now belongs to the community, that works. That's very interesting, because don't forget, everybody's given a chatzi shekel, and somebody is giving money and saying it belongs to the tzibor. That's all, then it's kosher. Says the Gemara Pshita. In other words, all those half shkolim that collected are all belonging to the Beis HaMikdash. They are not private property anymore. You can't say, oh, that's my half shekel over there. It's no longer your half shekel. It belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. Someone else decides to give their own funds and say, I'm giving this to the Beis HaMikdash, then again, that's communal funds and can be used for these korbanos tzibor. Says Gemara, well, isn't that obvious really? Because the person is handing them over as a communal fund and it's no longer his or hers, it would be his, because it belongs to the community. Says the Gemara, no. Mahu desema, I might have thought leichish. There's always a concern here. And you can imagine, perhaps the wealthier individuals who want to feel, they've got yahrzeit or whatever it is, that's my money being used on this particular day. I am going to give a huge amount of money, and that's, I'm going to swamp all the funds of Klal Yisrael with my money. So chances are, odds or whatever, I've given a 1 in 4 chance. I've actually given so much money, a bit like a lottery. The chances are the money that's being used for the korban will be my money. Now, if you give it wholeheartedly, that's fine. Says the Gemara, Ma the same, right at the end of the Gemara. Leichesh, let's be concerned as we turn the page. Shema lo yimsaram letziba yofer yofer. We should never allow such a thing. Why not? Because we should be concerned that maybe the individual at the bottom of it is thinking, nah, it's still my money. I've given it over to them, but it's my money being used for those korbanos. See, if everybody's giving half a shekel, they've given half a shekel, it's nothing to do with me anymore. If a person swamps the funds of the Beis HaMikdash by giving a huge amount and say, oh no, it's communal money, they are thinking at the back of their mind, it's really my money. It's going to be used for the korbanos. I'm, very excited. It's my money being used. Says the Gemara, I might have thought he's actually not handing it over yofer. We should never allow such a thing. Kamash malon, have kamash malon that this works. As long as you can be certain. Now, it may well be that the chachomim of the time may decide that we don't think anybody is really doing it with the correct intention. Look at Rashi there. Yofer b'leiv sholem. Yeah. In fact, there's a Rashi in Bob Metzi on the same Gemara who says, same word, just adds another word. Of course, a person will be very happy if he thinks it's my money being used today, and that is wrong. So as long as a person truthfully has given the money over and says it's nothing to do with me anymore, that's fine. But there's always a concern that a person deep down will think, oh, actually it's my money being used for the korban today. I've swamped the market. I've swamped the Beis HaMikdash. There's a concern, and therefore we should say maybe it's impossible for an individual to give money to the Beis HaMikdash and say this is communal funds. We should always be concerned about that. Says the Gemara, no, if you can be certain as you can be, and you trust this fellow, it is a possibility. Whether you'd ever want to do this is something else. So it goes back to the previous, David, your point before, whether we'd want to do this, it would work, because it's communal funds. Yeah? So we may not want to actually utilize this halacha, but in fact, in theory at least, if someone did hand over money to the Beis HaMikdash and said, and we can be truthful, imagine we had a lie detector, and we can be certain that this person is actually giving it over with the correct intention, saying this now belongs entirely to the Beis HaMikdash, then it would actually belong to the Beis HaMikdash. It becomes communal funds and therefore could be used. Okay? Now,
Sorry,
you can, yeah?
If I don't quite understand the process here. So the Brisa says, this is presumably from the collection of the Shkolim in Adar. Is that correct?
It's correct. So when we said it's Rosh Hashanah, this actually follows from the Brisa.
I understand.
Yes.
I understand, but I don't understand the sequence, what this extra phrase, V'yochid shesh nadiv mishalok, I don't know how that fits in. V'yochid shesh nadiv mishalok.
It doesn't fit in, but it's a brisa. We're just completing the brisa.
So say again. But what I mean, how does that fit in with the brisa at all?
No,
what's the halacha there?
This is halacha talking about the korban tzibur. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a tosefta in Perek Aleph halacha daled. It's a tosefta all about shkolim. Right?
Okay.
Telling about the rules of shkolim. Says this. So there's various halachas mentioned there in the tosefta. Yeah. One of them is the one we needed, and we needed to know this point about the first of Nisan being the first. Of the date.
No, I understand that. I understand that. I don't understand what the yochid is. What's the halacha of this yochid doing? Yeah.
Right. So it's the shkolim is telling us about lots of halachas about shkolim, about communal korbanos.
Okay.
Now, normally we always think about communal korbanos coming from the half shekel. Says this Tosefta, there's an additional halacha. Not saying it might always be used, but if an individual actually does give over something with the full intention that this belongs to the community, communal funds, that money can also be used. Don't think it has to come from the half shekel. No doubt he would have had to give it just maybe, in Adar, he could swamp and give a huge amount of money in Adar and say is communal funds, that money is communal funds and could be used for the korbanos. Not
So was this a common thing that individuals give a gift?
I don't know. I don't know. It may well be when they were very short of funds or whatever it was, that they the numbers of people really could not afford to give. Maybe they were utilizing this halacha. Again, you'd have to be certain that the person was giving it believe and really did mean it to belong to the community. And that's why it's being mentioned there. It's nothing to do with us, really, but as we often find, we mentioned the Tosefta, mentioned a brisa, and we just conclude that brisa with this final halacha. Yeah? So Malcolm had a quick question there.
Yeah, I got actually two questions. So one of the questions is, according to this story, it seems that they're saying that you might think that the person, it matters whether or not they really give it over fully in their head, but as long as they've actually given it.
No.
Think.
It's a bit more than that. In other words, I might have thought we're never going to trust someone to say that, because it's very difficult whether that individual really means what he's saying. That's what that's what it means, leichush. If a person comes saying, I'm giving this wholeheartedly to the Beis HaMikdash, maybe there's a bit of a suspicion and we shouldn't really allow it. There's going to be some people who might, get through and they don't really mean it. We might be concerned. No, if a person says that and he is honest with himself and you think you can trust the fellow, then that will be acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay, the second question is, the thing about the new and the old. So is that if somebody gives the
Half a shekel.
Donates, that goes with the new shekel. I mean, that just becomes part of the pot, the new pot, does it? I mean, it's not the same rule applies to.
No, you'd think it'll be the same rule.
The mitzvot.
In other words, the mitzvah
of doing it the new, not using the old.
That's a good point. If you say someone's giving a larger donation, does it fit into the normal rule that it's got to be brought and given just prior to Nisan, or can you bypass bypass? Yeah, that's what you're asking. And in other words, let's say that mid-year, could somebody come forward with a substantial sum? Could that be, or when could that be used? I mean, normally you'd think it would still all fit in with the pot. They'd realize how much they need. And therefore, again, you wouldn't want money to be used or collected more than a year earlier. Yeah, that would be the general rule. You wouldn't be, the main point here is you want the freshness of the money. You don't want old money, money that was given more than a year ago. That money should then be used for other things. You want the korbanos to come from freshly given funds rather than funds that were given some time back.
So this counts counts towards it.
No, everybody's giving a half shekel. That's a separate point.
Yes, but this extra money, is it part of the same discussion as what I'm saying in the text? Is it linked to this discussion of the new?
It is. It seems like it is. It's not clear. It's a very good point. It's not clear. But it would seem like the same rule would apply. We don't want money used for korbanos, communal korbanos, which is very old. That seems to be the main concern. Yeah? And we had another question from somebody.
Norman?
Anthony, yes.
I don't understand the mechanism here. So somebody gives money for korbanos, which goes into a general pot. I don't know which animal it's going to buy. I can't say I want a plaque on the side of the animal donated by me and Milu in the Shama.
Yeah.
So it just goes to any general animal. So why does my intention? I don't know which animal which korban my money is going to come from. Once I put money in the pot, why does my intention nullify? Then. So if it's nullified, what are they going to do? They're going to take my money out of the pot?
A good question. And you see from here the power of the mind. If when somebody hands over the money, they are not thinking, I'm giving this over. They are thinking, your uncle, the donor is thinking, That's my money because I want the korban. When eventually that money's used, that's going to be my korban. That's what a person may think. If they think that, they actually have not handed that over to the community. Nobody's going to know. It's all in the mind.
But lots of people giving a half. Lots of people giving a half.
When people give a half a shekel, you're quite right. There's a mitzvah of half. Everybody knows a half a shekel not going to go that far anyway. When they give the half shekel, they're giving the half shekel. It then belongs to the pot. It's the yearly amount. It's not a huge amount, and it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. So there's no concern there. But you are right. If when somebody gives their half shekel, they do think, I'm actually not giving it away to the Beis Hamikdash, then it would be wrong. That would be wrong. But here we're saying there's a doubt. When somebody's giving a separate amount, there's always a concern, do they really mean it or not? And the answer is they do, if we trust them. If they say this is what they've done, we will trust them.
And if we can't trust them, what do we do with them? We send the money back?
No, if we don't trust them, we would have thought we don't take the money from anybody. Because there are going to be some individuals maybe we won't be able to trust. And even if they say, and there's another point, even when a person says, I'm handing it over, the concern is that deep down, even though he's actually uttered those words, maybe deep down he really hasn't. His heart really is thinking that when that day comes and my money's used, I've given so much, that's me. Deep down, maybe he's not actually articulating that. He said, and he actually thinks he's giving it over. But that's what the Gemara says. Leichish, Shema, he hasn't given it, Yofe, Belev Sholem. Maybe, he might have said he is. But maybe there's a concern there. With a half a shekel, a small amount, we would try, there wouldn't be any doubt. You're giving this over the korbanos, it's going to be bottled, it's not your money, it's a small amount. Anyway, it's not going to buy a huge amount. You're giving a large amount. Do you really mean to give this away or not? To the whole community. It's not yours. It's got nothing to do with you once it belongs to the coffers of the Beis Hamikdash. Person may say yes, but deep down, maybe they think, oh, it's going to be like my plaque on for that day. Answer the Gemara, no. We would trust the person if they said that. Whether the Chachamim would allow it, that's up to them. There may come times where they may be more concerned. But it's strictly speaking, there's no problem with that if we would be able to trust the individual.
But there are some times when we let the families, when it's the wood offerings, isn't it, that we have all of the individual families bring their own.
Yes.
Part of it, Sibor.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It is a tub, but then it's individual. It's like, you're collecting money for a new shul, and it doesn't matter. You've got the paroiches or the Oren Kodesh donated by family so and so, and it would say so. They are handing that over, but that's a very good example. They're handing it over, but they still seem to be holding something there because the plaques they're saying donated by. Yeah. The holding on, it's not totally, of course it belongs to the shul, but they've donated the money. What we want from this individual giving the money is saying, it's got nothing to do with me, no plaque, no nothing. And that's quite tricky. Yes. Somebody else.
Yeah. Isn't it difficult assessment because the amount of contribution is relative to the person on situation? So to say if it is significant or not significant is not absolute. It depends on the person.
Yeah, of course it does. Absolutely. It will be.
And so it's difficult to assess if he will consider that with total heart or not.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. That would be a concern. Again, it will be up to the rabbis to decide whether they want to utilize this halacha. However, if we would trust this person, if he came and said, I honestly am giving this over to the community. I have nothing more to do with this money. No, no glory at all. Can't have any glory. It's not mine anymore. It belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. If a person would say that, then we would trust him. That's the bottom line here. Now, if there's a reason to suspect that he's not telling the truth, that's something else. But if a person does say that and honestly says that, then we would actually accept the money. That's really what we're saying. So we've now found...
Norman, just one question. Why are we mixing the Machatzia Shekel with the other fund? Since the whole, that's why it's called Machatzia Shekel. Each individual will give a Chetzi Shekel. That's basically what otherwise we have a problem because we have other funds Like, for example, when things come back to the temple on the 50 years, when it doesn't belong to anyone else, what do we do with money? And there's other funds that come in. Why do we confuse the two? Why do we put them together here?
What do you mean? Well, what we're saying is this: whether they always would do this is something else. What we're saying is it's possible if somebody would give money and say, I want this to belong to the Beis HaMikdash to be used for public purposes, the bottom line is we would trust them. Now, it may well be that if they've got sufficient for their korbanos of the whole year, they wouldn't use this. But it could happen, let's say, for whatever reason, they were short. And therefore, what we're saying here, if somebody actually is donating and they say, I'm giving it totally to the Beis HaMikdash, then we're saying that we would believe him. That's the bottom line here. Whether we want to actually use this halacha, we don't know. And I would have assumed in most instances they wouldn't want to use this. As you quite rightly say, everybody's giving their half shekel. And so why not? We don't want, people, special rules for different people. But all we're saying here is that can work. If somebody says, I'm giving money to the Beis HaMikdash solely, and it belongs to them and nothing more to do with me, what we're learning from here, we would trust the person who says those words, utters those words. And we tell him, you do realize that if you're not, if it's not true what you're telling us, then the korban is not a proper korban for the whole community here. So no doubt we'd be saying that. But if he actually said, yes, I appreciate that, this now does belong to the community, then the point is we believe him and it could be used. Whether they want to use it in that way, that's up to the rabbis. Yeah? So all we're learning from here is it works. And more importantly, we believe that individual if he says something and say, yes, fine. And therefore, a person would give something away, belev sholem, if he says so and we believe him. But whether we want to use it, you're quite right, it does confuse things a little bit. And we don't want favorites. So again, we normally wouldn't want to do this, but at least it's there, available. If say we were short of funds, I mean, maybe, I don't know, whatever it is, the government or whatever, the local authorities come around and take all the money, they're short of money. This would be a way of therefore collecting the money if somebody wanted to do that. So that could be
strange. If later on he would say, actually, I didn't really mean it. I mean, the fact is, either when somebody gives something to the Beis HaMikdash, it belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, regardless of what their intent was, which we could understand. You've given it, that's it. You've given it. Or, as they're saying, we do believe in intent, but if the man says, I mean it to go to the Beis HaMikdash, we believe him. But if it turns out later on that he didn't mean it, because he actually says, I never meant that, then that would imply that they can't use it, because intent is important.
Yes, you're right. That would cause a problem.
What they should say is, give it to the Beis HaMikdash. It doesn't matter what your intent is. You've given it. You've given it. That's it. It's gone. It's past the gate.
That's a good point. But what we're saying here is to be part of the communal funds, intent is crucial. Now, you're right. There is another rule we've seen in other Gemaras. We say Hefker Bezdin Hefker, the power of the Bezdin have a power to move funds as they like. Hefker, there's this point of it can become Hefker. Here, we very much want this to be with Leiv Sholem. It's not just money, monetary worth. It's the.
Does that apply to the Machatzis? Does that apply to the Machatzis?
You'd have to say the same with Machatzis.
It's nothing to do with Simon's point.
Sorry, one at a time. Yeah.
It's nothing to do with It's nothing to do with rich people, not rich people. A lot of money. Anybody who gives to the Beis HaMikdash must have the intention. Even the Machatzis.
Yes, absolutely.
We have that with the original Machatzis shekel. It was Hadal.
Absolutely. But it would have to be explained to people when you're giving the money, you are giving it to the community. It doesn't belong to you at all anymore. Now, as I say, with half a shekel, it's not a large amount. And you wouldn't be able to buy a whole korban with that. So that would be very, why should anybody not want to give it away, like somebody for the stocker? I'm giving away the stocker. But if you're giving something away, I might have thought a large sum, a one-off, he might want to actually retain, as he said here, a person might like to think that today's korban's on me and I'm the one, it's really my money still.
Shekel is not a requirement, it's a voluntary donation, it's an adova.
No, it's compulsory.
So where's intent there?
Well, no, when I say compulsory, you've got every person has to give, you have to give a half a shekel.
The rest is an adova. Anything over that is an adova.
Yeah, you've got to give your half shekel first. Whether, as I say, whether people would want to use this, and you say the rabbis at the time, I said, we're not having any extras, sorry. You want to donate for something of the Beis HaMikdash, Gesundheit, but, not for the korbanos. But at least we know that we are that's a very powerful point, that we're trusting individuals if they say, yes, that is, I have actually given it over. So now we're left with the following final question here, which is our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, when it reckoned all the things, Abor Rosh Hashanah, and it said the person listened for various things, it did not mention Shkolim. Why didn't our Mishnah mention Shkolim? Yeah. Have a look at the second line down of the Gemara of Daf Zayin Omid Beis. Do you understand the question? The question we're now faced with is, it's wonderful. We're telling me the first of Nisan is the turnover point, the crossover point, when we move from the old Shkolim to the new Shkolim. Well, then Nisan is a Rosh Hashanah as far as that's concerned. Why shouldn't it be mentioned in the Mishnah? We mentioned, Regolim. We mentioned, of course, we were talking about kings. We were talking about delaying bringing korbanos. Why doesn't it mention also that it's Rosh Hashanah, the first of Nisan, is the first of the new korbanos? Very interesting. Says Gemara, Batoni Dinon, the Tana of our Mishnah. Kivan Diktoni, we learned in that brisa, it turned out to be a brisa, what happens if they do bring from the old money? Is that okay? But we said it's okay, which means, have a look at the Gemara, Kivan Diktoni, seeing as we learned, it was Shmuel and then subsequently confirmed in the brisa, in Hevi Yodsa, Lo Psikale, which means it's not fixed. When you had a king, we said the Rosh Hashanah was the crossover point. It's now the second year of his reign. You're not going to say, oh, it might be, it might not be. You hit the first of Nisan. Yeah? Here, you can't say 100%. It's true. That's when you should be bringing the new half shekel from the first of Nisan. But if, for whatever reason, you brought old half shekels from the previous year, that would still be a good korban, and you could use that money wrongly, but it would work. Do you understand? Therefore, it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. We want things in the Mishnah which were absolutely crystal clear, and not only the preferred route, the absolute route, kings. Bal Ta'acher, when you hit actually Bal Ta'acher, of course, is the 15th of Nisan. You hit the 15th of Nisan, you've missed your opportunity now, Bal Ta'acher, no going back. Here, we have it, it's not what's called psika. It's not absolutely fixed, because if somebody did bring money from the old Chatzi Shekel, and it was brought as a korban, as the Talmud, that would be okay, and you'd be Yotzer. And therefore, for that reason, it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. Now, there was something else mentioned in the brisa.
Norman,
turn back to Zion or Aleph. Somebody was saying,
don't you bring the Chatzi Shekel you bring before Nisan? It's the Nisan is the time of the new Korbanos, but the time of bringing it is before Nisan, isn't it? Then we bring it from Adar.
Oh yeah, we mentioned that. That's what we have Parsha Shkolim, because in Adar, the beginning of Shkolim says, on the first of Adar, Mashmiim ala Shkolim, which means they will go around announcing, bring the new money. And then from the first of Nisan, that's the date. So it could be mentioned in the Mishnah, say from the first of Nisan, that's when you should be not bringing, utilizing the new half shekel.
So there are different start times then, aren't there? So for the
yes.
Adar is the time of bringing, and
yes.
the time of using.
Yes.
So you could suggest that there's not one Rosh Hashanah, because there are it's a dual process. There's an initiation at Adar.
Yeah, but that's only just the collection point. I mean, you could collect whenever you like, really.
Well,
I
can't give you 5 shkalim for the next 10 years.
No, you can't. Agreed.
I can only give you from Adar, I think.
Yes, but you could absolutely. But you could have mentioned in the Mishnah from the 1st of Nisan you start utilizing that half shekel. But your example would be from another date you start giving it. But there's no particular Rosh Hashanah. No, you haven't got a one date that you'd have to give.
If you've got the 1st of Adar.
No, and then you goes on. Mashmir, and then
that's the same as any Rosh Hashanah. So you start then, and then you can go on.
Right, yeah. Fine. So you're saying you could have it mentioned in the Mishnah, the Rosh Hashanah for announcing. Fine. But then it would only be for the announcement being made. True. But again, as we said before, it's not compulsory. Well, I say it's not compulsory. If you utilize the old korban, the old money, it wouldn't matter. So therefore, as it's not mentioned, yeah.
If you said Rosh Hashanah if you said that the Rosh Hashanah is in Nisan, you might wonder, is that when you have to bring it?
No. But the Mishnah could have been very clear and said, from the 1st of Nisan, you utilize the new Chatzi Shekel. You could have said that. But the Gemara says he's not saying that because it's not it's not ma'akev. It doesn't prevent the korban if you brought the old one. And we don't want that. We want things in the Mishnah which are absolutely not just crystal clear, means there's no room for any maneuver from that date. And that's not true in the case. That's what we're saying here. There was another example, though, we mentioned, and this is the last one. Have a look on page Zayin Omad Aleph, the 4th line down, V'yesh Omrin, Af Lischiras Botim. Can you see that? Zayin Omad Aleph. There was one final announcement, and that was Yesh Omrim. Some people say, Lischiras Botim, interesting that some people say, what does Lischiras Botim mean? Have a look at the Rashi on Daf Zayin Omad Aleph. Hamaske Bayis L'Chavero. Talk about house rentals, letting houses. V'Omer, and someone said, L'Shona Zu. This is your rental for this year. Kol Soshnosa Be'echad B'Nissen. It's the end of Nisan, the 1st of Nisan. Afilu lo doba el chodesh echad. Wow. So Hanukkah time, you say, I'm giving you this for this year. You have an arrangement with somebody. Obviously, if you wrote, I'm giving it to you for one complete year, that's no question. You go from one date to another date. But if you just had it in your documentation, the rental agreement, it said this is for this year. In the time of the Gemara, it's Nisan was the point. So if you said this year, you meant up to Nisan. Interesting. That's what some people say. Back to our Gemara. Tonu Rabbanon, 4th line down on Daf Zayin Amud Beis. Let's see if we can battle on with this. Hamaskir Bayis L'Chaverei. Someone, what do you say, letting or rent? No, it's the letting, isn't it? Letting the property to his friend Lashona. If he said for a year, then of course you'd have the document, you'd have the date, and you know it'd be a year later. But if Imana Lashona Zu for this year, rental agreements went to the 1st of Nisan. Even if it's signed the 1st of Adar, Kivan Shegia Yom Echad B'Nisan also Loishona. His time is up. Woo! Wow, that is interesting. Have a look at Rashi. And actually, the 3rd line down is a very fascinating Rashi in its own. I think we mentioned this point before. Some people may remember. Have you got the 3rd line of Rashi? Tonu Rabbanon Hamaskir Bayis L'Chaverei. V'lo Garsinon Minolon. The Gemara should not have. Where do we learn this from? Delav Mikroi Yalef de Midrabononhu. This is not learned from a posuk. It's the way people behaved, and that was it's Midrabanon. That the year finishes on the 1st of Nisan. It's not like some of these others where we spoke about, for example, Balta Acher, delaying being in Korbanos, where we had Psukim. This is Midrabanon, the fact that it was the local custom that the year went up to the first of Nisan. Now, why do I mention this? This is quite important. You can see from this Rashi that had the Gemara said the word minolon, from where do we learn this? That would be Minat Torah. You'd be searching for a posuk in the Torah. Worth remembering, if ever you come up any other Gemaras and it says minolon, certainly it seems to be Rashi's view. There's another Rashi elsewhere that says the same. If it says minolon, I mean, the actual translation is, where do we learn this from? And you'd expect maybe you bring out a Mishnah or a Brisa. If it says the word minolon, where do I know this from? It means I'm looking for a posuk in Tanakh to prove this. You with me? So worth remembering.
Would that include Norman? Would that include Halachah L'Moshe Sinai or an Asmachta or not?
Normally, try to scratch my head at the moment. It would normally be a posuk when it says minolam, because the Gemara would not. I'm trying to think of an example where the Gemara would actually answer and say Halachah L'Moshe Sinai. The examples would normally they've come up with a posuk.
Okay.
Although the back, if you want a bit of homework, people interested, the Maratz Chayes brings a couple of examples in Shas where minolon is actually used for midrabanon. Could be there's the interesting text there, I don't know, but the Maratz Chayes at the back, people interested, does, you know, with his search engine, meaning his head, he does find a couple of examples where minolon isn't actually Minat Torah. But normally, I think, Mervyn, it would actually be a posuk would be looking for, because we are asking, where do we learn this from? And we normally the learning, it's not really learned from Halachah L'Moshe Sinai, it's just like passed down by a tradition.
Yeah. Okay.
So
but it's been Haftarah, that's all. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's worth remembering. If you come across if you come across something which is a drabonon, then put your hand up and you know where to write in, and we'll see what we can do.
It could be a pasuk from Nach. It could be a pasuk from Nach.
Yeah, absolutely. A pasuk Nach as well. Yeah. But it's not midrabanon. It's not like the rabbis have instituted, or it's the local custom. When we're talking about letting properties, the rabbis decide it's the month that we take is going to be Nisan. And look at the next Rashi.
Norman.
Yes.
Sorry, to interrupt. Just on the question which Malcolm just asked. About Minalan, that's only about whether or not to use it about Halachah L'Moshe Sinai.
Yes.
Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, second line of Masechet Sukkah. It's got Minalahu. Hal Hilchata Gemirelahu. So it's not quite Minayin, but Minalahu.
You've got Minalahu there, and what does it bring?
Hilchata Gemirelahu. Hilchata Gemirelahu. And Hilchatag Esenatiot Rabab Nisu Chamayim Alachal Moshe Sinai. Yeah, Nisu Chamayim Damar Rabasi after Hilchatag Mirelhud Amar Rabasi Ba'amar Rabbi Yochanan Esenatiot Rabab Nisu Chamayim Alachal Moshe Sinai.
What was the word you said, Minalahu, right at the beginning?
It says Minalahu, but where does the Rabbi know that you do the Hoshana in the Mikdash?
Yes.
Where's the source for that? And it is Halakha L'Moshe Sinai.
Yes.
And
it's not,
and the language is
a very good call indeed. It's not the word minolon, which we're talking about.
Indeed.
Agree. It could be a subtle difference.
Yeah.
Minolahu. It could be a very good call though. Very good example. Interesting. That's so from there I think you'd learn one either way. Either you'd say minolon is different to minolahu, or maybe you've actually got a proof from there that, and again, Minolahu could be Halachah L'Moshe Sinai would actually be included in when we say, because you look at what we've got here, Minolon Delav Mikroi Yoliflu, says Rashi here. He doesn't say it's Demidrabonanu. He does say, he could have said, V'lo Gasinu Minolon Delav Minat Torah or Halachah L'Moshe Sinai. He said, "Delav mikroi." We don't learn it from psukim. So Rashi seems to be taking this word minolon. Really does mean that word is a posuk. We're looking for a posuk.
Right.
You see that? That seems to be, but I say it's a very good call. Yeah, and a very it may be worth looking into to see whether that ties up with other Rashis.
Let's look up. Yeah.
Yeah, no, very good, excellent.
Thanks.
So Ela be'echad ba'adar. So even if, what is Ela be'echad ba'adar? Said the Gemara here. Even if this person only went into the property on the 1st of Adar, then when it comes to the 1st of Nisan, his time is up, sadly. Ela be'echad ba'adar, avol b'botzi mihochi, if it would be less than a month. Lo amrinan also lo shalom, nobody would say that his time is up. He goes in halfway through Adar, and it says in it for this year, he cannot mean this coming Nisan. Why? The Dorbo, let's read it again. The Dorbo Shona Shlema. When he writes this year, clearly, although he said this year, he really means a year from day to day. Yeah, you with me? There's no way you're telling me, he rents his property half the way through Adar, just after Purim, and he said this is for this year. And he paid, can you imagine what the rent is? Nobody's going to say then it's just for 2 weeks. And he gives you a good reason. That's a fascinating halacha, because, I mean, again, this would very much depend on custom. Would you say people rent, anybody here in the property market and renting properties, do people rent places just for a week, 2 weeks?
Holiday lets.
Holiday, yeah, you're right. It depends where it would be. Interesting. It sounds like, though, this is not a holiday let, as you'll see, as the Gemara would explain here. It's really to get out and to get out the rain. He's really looking for somewhere to live rather than just enjoying the holiday. But yeah, and again, you can see from here it does very much depend on local custom. You can see the halacha is that it only goes up to Nisan if there is a month, at least a month to go. But we haven't finished yet. Says the Gemara. We'll stop in a moment. Now, this says the Gemara. Afilu lama. Next line. Afilu lama do'oma yom echad b'shana choshev shana. Do you remember when we spoke about kings? We did speak about somebody. Remember a king ascending the throne at the end of the year. Even the end of Adar, once you hit the 1st of Adar, is now considered in the 2nd year of his reign. Shani Hochi, it's different here. Delo Torach Inish Lemega Basel Abotzim Mitzrosin Yomin. If there's no way this person, again, it depends, and you understand the logic here, and it sounds like it's not holiday let. Nobody would be looking for a place less than, certainly in those times, less than 30 days. And therefore, clearly, if they write this year, he does not mean just to the end of that. He doesn't mean to the end of that Nisan, which is only 2 weeks' time. So that's the date. Says the Gemara, I'm not quite sure, why should it be like this? Says the Gemara, Va'ema Tishri. Maybe, I understand you've got to have a cutoff point. And you've got to say, when you say this year, you mean up to a particular point. If I said a year, then I'm clearly renting for one complete year. But if I say for this year, it's got to have a meaning somewhere. Why did the Rabbanon take on Nisan rather than Tishri? Have a look at Rashi. Tishri Rosh Hashanah Lischira Spotim. And the same rule will apply, but maybe from Tishri. The same rule will apply, that in other words, if you're renting, and you're up to just before Elul, then again, when you hit Tishri, that will be the new year. Why do we say Nisan? Kivan Shegia Tishri also Shoni. Maybe then do you understand the question? We're saying that when it comes to property rental, the year is the 1st of Nisan. Why is it Nisan rather than Tishri? You've got to choose a date. Tishri is our normal Rosh Hashanah. Why should it be Nisan? Or Mashani, back to our Gemara. Stam, have you got it? Yom Hashanah. Va'ima Tishri, Stam Ki. Beginning of line is Ki. I'm going bit quickly here. I can see those 2 dots, 1 line to go, so aiming for it. Stam ki aga inish besa. When a person's looking to rent a property, lukula yamos hagashomim aga. Normally you're looking, and this backs to your non-holiday rental, they're looking for a roof over their heads. And they don't want to have to go out in the midwinter to start looking for another property. They want the roof over their heads for the winter. Maybe after winter, they'll start looking for something else. But the moment it's winter. And therefore, what we're saying here, if a person's having it just before Tishri, you'd expect them still to go to Nisan. You with me? Because they want to have the winter months open. So that's the point. If a person's renting something, even in midsummer, you'd expect they're going now right through till that year will finish at the end of the winter period. Once that's over, it's easier to go around looking for properties. They don't want to have to do that in midwinter. That's what we're saying. Says the Gemara, but what about the Tana Kama? Don't forget this statement was some people say that the 1st of Nisan is the Rosh Hashanah for rental. What means some people? Clearly, the Tana Kama didn't hold that. And not only that, what about Tana Dinan? What about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah actually says, does not include the rentals as being the 1st of Nisan. Why not? Says the Gemara, no. Says the Gemara, Benisan nami mishkach shchiche kitri. What's kitri? Clouds. Sometimes you can have a late winter. Especially we were talking before about, with the leap years and one thing and another, or the other way around. You might still have a little bit of rain in Nisan. And therefore, nobody would actually want to have a property just to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, just in case it was still raining after that, and now they're having trouble to find another property after Nisan. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to move when it's still in the rain months. And therefore, our Tana, and the Tana Kama of that Brisa and of Zion or Medalef were of the opinion Nisan would not be a cut-off point for rental. And therefore, if it's not going to be that date, you then would move to Tishri. Tishri would normally be the date. I said there must be a date that they would say, if you write in a document for this year, what does this mean? This therefore means if it's not going to be the 1st of Nisan, we might as well go back to the Rosh Hashanah we know and love, which is our 1st of Tishri. That would be the point. So in the Brisa again, the Tana Kama does not mention the 1st of Nisan being the Rosh Hashanah for rentals, because they felt, no, people would want to have the whole winter a roof over their heads, and therefore they want to go beyond the 1st of Nisan. 1st of Nisan, a lovely month, it's the first, the Rosh Chodoshim, so therefore if it's not going to be the 1st of Nisan, it will therefore move to the 1st of Tishri. And with that, gentlemen, you will be maybe pleased or not pleased to hear, those 2 dots tell us we have now finished Nisan, and we move in the Mishnah to the very next Rosh Hashanah. After the Nisan, we now move to the 1st of Elul. So all being well next week, we can move across to, say, the 1st of Elul for the next installment. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Martin, good to see you. That's all right. And got a few other people here.
Apologies for being late.
That's quite all right. Good to see you. Charles, nice to see you, Charles. Away from Charles. You're keeping well, Charles, I hope. A thumbs and hands. And we have Ian Braidman here. Can't see him, but on mute. Good to have you with us. And everybody should be well. Keep well. And let's hope for good news all around.
Shkoyach.
Keep very well.
Very much.
All the best.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.